we'll move on to Valentine from 2001. About a group of women who are stalked by, I guess, some guy around Valentine's Day. He sends them fucked up Valentine's Day cards and gifts, and he attacks them too. It's good stuff. The funny thing is, I want to call this a modern day slasher, but the more and more I think about it, this movie's almost 20 years old. I mean, I remember watching this one with a couple of my friends, just renting it out roughly around the time that it came out, and yeah, it's I will say, I think for a slasher from, let's call it the noughties, I guess that's what they call it, from, movies made in between 2000 and 2009. And I think it's a pretty decent slasher movie.
I've seen this movie maybe twice before, but it's been quite some time since I last saw it. I'm just going to throw out maybe 10, 12 years. I mean, it's been years since I've seen this one, so I was really excited to see it again, especially me being a big slasher fan, and post-Scream slashers always interest me. About a year or so ago, I watched Urban Legends again, and I found it somewhat underwhelming. It's a movie I used to enjoy, but then I went back to it, and I found I didn't quite like it as much as I hoped I would. And I feel like it's much the same for this movie, and I bring that up because the same director was behind both movies. This movie has a lot of ideas I probably would have liked more in the 80s. I mean, I'll just say that the kills in this movie, almost every single one of them is pretty good. I like the bow and arrow scene, that's pretty good stuff. I like the hot tub scene. So there's a lot of good kills in this movie. But the basic story just, it feels like it's lacking. Like the whole red herrings, like, oh my god, who's the killer? And when we finally find out who the killer is, it's like, oh hey, that explained literally nothing, well done. And I don't know, it just, I really wish I could like this more. But after seeing it again, I found myself, I enjoyed enough of it to warrant me watching it again in the future. But I have to say I was somewhat disappointed, and when it comes to post-Scream slashes, I'm going to have to always stick with I Know What You Did Last Summer, which I think is actually a pretty suspenseful movie. And then there's a movie from 2000 titled Cherry Flowers, which I think has a lot of really interesting ideas, and it actually feels a lot more unique than what I find Valentine had going for it.
Look, I thought the mystery element in this one is quite decent. I mean, there's at least maybe 4 different guys that they set it up that it could be. Now, obviously, with that opening scene, you're probably looking more towards, someone somewhere around the age of the girls that are getting killed. So I never truly believed that detective could have, or, the cop, that he could have been the killer, even though there was like one scene where they kind of tried to make it look like he possibly could have been.
I think one thing actually about that, the whole opening scene is fine, but you could say it just leads the audience to suspect it's going to be someone around their age, and it could have, for all we know, the killer could have been killing due to some completely unrelated reason, which I actually think I might have preferred over the direction they went, if only because, I mean, some of these characters, the suspects, were I guess interesting, but I don't know. I'm not saying it was obvious where it was going, because it's not. But 1 second, like, oh hey, this guy's your number 1 suspect, and then the very next scene, oh hey, it's obviously not going to be that guy. It just, I don't know. It just, I never felt entirely engaged with the whole mystery aspect, especially since, like, half these guys they know, and the other half, hey, this guy paid for one scene, could it be him? I don't know, but I also don't know if it really has an emotional impact on me.
Well, the opening to this movie, I mean, we open seeing Katherine Heigl's cleavage, which, that's something. Even though we did talk a bit earlier about Klaus Kinski being a bit of a difficult guy to work with, I've kind of heard similar things about her, or maybe that just a lot of people who work with her think she's a bitch or something. I don't know. But the other amusing part about that opening scene, she's having this date with this Jason guy who always refers to himself in the third person. He was
Talk about an intro. Yeah.
yeah, very interesting character, very amusing guy to watch with the conversations that he's having. Comes off as a bit of a psycho with how he talks about himself and some of the faces that he pulls, but I think it was deserving of some pity sex. He made her pay, but he still tried to get some. He's quite determined, that guy. I guess the other part of that opening scene, then we go to, the creepy location where she's like cutting open a corpse, and it's a pretty dark place to be attacked by a serial killer.
Yeah, I do have to say that sequence right there, I thought was actually pretty good. I thought it was pretty suspenseful. And it's worth mentioning, I really do like the design of the killer. I like the mask, and I just like I like the whole look.
Yeah, and we get to see the killer quite early, so he pops up in that opening scene. We get to see the costume and everything, and it's always good to have that little hint of subtlety to the costume, just so, don't go full Slipknot mode where, everyone just looks like a monster type mask. Now that we talk about the killer costume, it made me think towards the end of the movie, as we begin, or by the end of the movie, we essentially learn, okay, who the killer is. And there's multiple scenes where you see this person not in costume, and then obviously they're also in costume killing people at this party. So it made me think... the movie Mrs. Doubtfire with Robin Williams, how there's a scene towards the end where he has to continually get in and out of costume because he's going between tables. And I kind of felt like at some point, you think the guy would screw up here where maybe he would still be in costume and talking to his girlfriend, and it's like, oh shit, I fucked up, and now I'm wearing... Well, kind of like Mrs. Doubtfire did, where he's wearing the lipstick or whatever, and he fucks up with all the costume changes. I was just kind of expecting like similar, well, not expecting, but you think that kind of thing would happen in this situation with just constantly getting in and out, of the costume. Another interesting thing, I look... As I do for a lot of movies when we discuss them, I'll look on IMDb, see what people are saying about it. It's only got a 4.9 on IMDb, which is rather low. And I guess it seemed to have, like when the movie came out, a lot of people shat on it, I guess. I never really heard... I never heard anyone rave about the movie, but I don't know if I ever recall people talking that badly about the movie either. And I noticed that when you look at the ratings, it seems females rate the movie a little bit higher than the males do. So that was kind of interesting. I guess that might have something to do with the fact that it centers around a group of women, but technically a lot of slashers do. So, what is looking at Denise Richards too tough for the guys? They might be a little gay.
Yes.
It's not tough to look at. Though I do speaking of that, I do appreciate the ambitious detective trying to get with Paige, Denise Richards' character. So that was a valiant effort and attempt, which didn't quite pan out for him. Though I will say one scene that she's involved with, and it's one of my favorite. Well, the line itself maybe... It doesn't do anything for anyone, but it's a line that I constantly reference in real life, just as a joke to my wife or whatever situation comes up. But there's a scene where he goes upstairs, he gets naked, and she kind of just like, so you took me up here to show me your penis, and he's kind of and eventually he's like, what are you waiting for? Wax it. So I always use the wax it line.
I'm sure you do. Yeah, so actually about that scene, this thing's not necessarily interesting, but I'm just somewhat confused what she expected. Like, I want, like, I'm assuming maybe she knew he was going to do that, and she just went up just to screw him over. I have to say though, tying that guy down and then doing what she did, I would probably constitute that as assault.
Well, technically, he did ask her to wax it.
Okay.
So
I guess. I mean, I'll just see that court case, right?
I think she'll get off on a technicality there, and he'll have to get off in another way. I assume that what she expected out of that situation was just maybe a little more romance leading into the sex.
Maybe she didn't know
rather than just like, here's my dick, let's do this.
And actually, toward the end, this just hit me, and this is something else that sort of bothered me. Toward the end, there's like this giant epic Uber party going on. And hey, it actually has pretty good music. I heard Linkin Park in the background during one scene. Another scene I heard some Disturbed. So I'm enjoying the soundtrack. But then this is hot tub kill, and just as it happens, only one person's in the hot tub. I absolutely do not believe that in the party that has like a few hundred people there, only one person would be in the hot tub. I just don't buy it for a second. And there's another scene in which a woman runs across the killer accidentally. I think it's in a gaming pool room, and it seems obvious to me that people were in the room. They're like cops sitting around there, and hey, the room's entirely empty aside from the killer and this woman who just happened to stumble in. And again, I just don't buy that room would be empty. I don't buy it for a second. It just seemed awfully convenient, and it might seem like a small thing, and maybe it is. But I'm watching these scenes and like, where's really other people in the party just in a single room? It didn't seem real to me.
Look, obviously it was a really big place. I mean, it's a rich daddy's girl type of place. I mean, they've got a whole room just for a pool, an indoor pool.
It was a nice room.
So I would assume that, they've kind of just tried to keep the party and I know, you expect some people to kind of run off into other parts of the house, but I'd imagine they'd try to contain a certain part of the house for the party. And
I mean, they might try to contain it. I don't see how they could, though. I mean, it's not like they have guards guarding every door. It's pretty much a free range type thing. It just didn't strike me as something that was particularly realistic, but then again, I've never been to a party at a mansion before, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned the soundtrack, and that's another thing that popped out to me. So this is like one of those movies that just has a lot of, like, some nostalgic value to it as well, because there's so many bands in here that I listen to a lot. Like, I had a lot of these CDs that these songs came from. They had Deftones in there, they had Static X, they had Disturbed, as you said. I think I even heard Orgy in there. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. But my daughter was watching some of this movie, and she saw the scene, the one with the Deftones song in it, and immediately as that drum beat started, she looked at me and was like, is this Deftones? And I looked at her and I was like, my job as a parent is done.
Well done. Must be a good feeling.
Just a couple of other small things. David Boreanaz, or I don't know how you pronounce his name. I will just say, the funny thing here is, see, I have my own name for this guy whenever I see him. I call him David Boring Ass, and mainly because he's one of those guys who, he's fairly mediocre to average actor who's really only got his popularity from being like this stud muffin type guy in some popular TV shows.
Now, at the risk of sounding ignorant, which guy is this? See the alcoholic?
Yes.
Okay. I see what you mean.
Yeah. Anyways, I don't know if anyone else out there also calls him that, but maybe I'm the only one. But come on. It's a clever name. It sounds similar to his actual name, so.
A+.
Yeah. there is also, I mean, we should probably also mention the weirdo neighbor of Kate, the one who likes to rhyme. Hey, Kate, you want to date, Kate?
So fate, Kate.
Yeah, and
Hey, you have to respect the guy for living his life.
yeah, well, I have a feeling there is no date with Kate, and he'll be left to masturbate.
I see. You're like a rapper now.
Yeah.
Actually, that reminds me of another character that I think just had one scene. But it was I found it quite amusing. I didn't mention this movie has like a few small portions of comedy. There's like the speed dating scene, which is pretty funny. Um, um,
One of my favorite things in the movie is that weirdo neighbor when there's a scene where he gets, attacked, and I just like the line, "I am not well." I mean, that much is clear.
yeah, that was quite amusing. And there's another scene in which the rich girl is arguing with her, I guess technically his stepmother, and it's just like a typical catty argument because these people are basically the same age. Imagine on the side note having a stepmother being the same age as you. It might be different if you're male, but just the argument though, like, oh, I think of you as a stepmother as soon as you're old enough to rent a car on your own, and others like catty argument, male or the bride from Hal, I think was another line. And it's just a little small comedic scene. I feel like she was undervalued, the Asian stepmother. She could have been a very interesting character. Or, I also wanted to point out the scene during the outshow, if you were to call that an outshow. That was, that's a scene that always stuck with me. Now, I really like the Carol it ends with bow and arrow type thing, which is a, Cupid-esque reference. I like that. I thought it was cool. But that outshow was one of the strangest things I've ever seen. Like, is those things real? Do those things exist? Do people go to the things? Because that doesn't look enjoyable whatsoever.
Love me. Love me. Love me.
Like, that just seemed like, I guess it's technically out, and I'm not against out or anything, but if that's what out is, I could do without. I do enjoy that they referenced later to the police officer, yeah, it's really bad out. It's like, oh yeah, I've seen it, it's pretty bad out. So I appreciate that. But I mean, I don't know, that scene always stuck with me because it was just so weird. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, I've been to museums before. I like museums, they're fine, but that was not a museum, so I have no idea what that was.
That was an impressive, elaborate attempt at arranging a threesome.
Yeah, that's a good point. I felt sort of bad for the guy. Like, he tried so hard.
Yeah.
I sort of like how she's just standing there undressing and not saying anything. Actually, just one more small thing. I enjoyed how this movie stole a plot element from Alone in the Dark.
Just remind me what that is.
Nosebleed.
Ah, the nosebleed. Okay, yeah. I'm
going to assume. No, maybe I'm wrong in my assumption, but I'm going to assume they saw Alone in the Dark because I don't know. It seems like it's like the exact same type of thing. Only I think it's done better in Alone in the Dark, but that's just me.
Okay, well, look, I had a decent time with this one. I thought it was pretty entertaining, and there's some nostalgic value to it, like with the soundtrack, and, this is one of those rare movies that I saw for the first time with a bunch of my friends, and with a bunch of friends who aren't necessarily horror fans, and, we had a pretty good time with it from what I recall, and that's always just kind of translated into all my other viewings. It brings back certain memories and things like that. And I guess one other thing is that you brought up Scream a couple of times, and I feel like my enjoyment of this one is kind of on par with my enjoyment of Scream. I mean, I know a lot of other people that out there would consider Scream to be a better movie, so I'm not going to argue that, but just the amount of fun I had with this one is similar to the amount of fun I had with that one. So I tossed up between a 7 and an 8 for this. I'll probably go with an 8, just because, like I said, there's a lot of decent kills in this movie, and there's a nostalgic value for me personally. The women, there's quite a few attractive women in the movie. Even, look, I mean, Denise Richards, you know, she's probably the hottest one there, even though she's a little on the skinny side for my tastes. But still, enjoyable. Mwah.
Yeah, so this is one that, like I said, I probably enjoyed more when I was a kid, but having revisited it, I'm not necessarily surprised by my, I guess we could say, disappointment, being that same thing happened with Urban Legend. I know, it just feels at times sort of shallow. It has really cool kills, and I feel like the story had potential, but this just added post-96 slashes out there that I thought had both a bad mystery, bad story overall. I mean, gold kills are great, but it didn't have, I mean, it had some funny scenes, but I wanted a bit more from it. So I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10.
One thing that I did forget to mention earlier that I wanted to just highlight, I think the poster for this one is pretty cool. Like the mask made out of the he loves me not letters, a diary, whatever you want to call it. I just think it's really cool looking poster for a slasher movie.
Yes.